Thank you. When conducting a research in a field or in a hospital settings or in a community settings, we will all collect the data. The data is nothing but a piece of information. The data, as such as data will convey minimum information for the audience. But the data has to be converted into information in order to give a meaningful information to the audience. So the data has to be reduced, the data has to be composed, and the data has to be grouped, and finally it has to be analyzed. So for that, the data has to be converted into meaningful information. Not only the information has to be converted again into the intelligence. So the intelligence has to be discussed in the discussion part of any research article. So this kind of process has to be followed in each and every research process. And this webinar is all about how to go about with the statistics. What are the basic points to be understood while conducting a research methodology? So this is very useful for the budding doctors who is very much interested in conducting research, as well as the postgraduate students. They will be more keen in completing their thesis. Sorry. And for the faculties who is eligible for their promotions, they has to be completed that kind of a research methodology or research publication in order to get promoted. So this is very important topic for all the categories of the population in the medical field to orient about the basics of biostatistics and research methodology. So I take this opportunity to welcome Honorable Chairman Mr. J.S. Satish Kumar Sir, Vice Chairman Dr. Visambar to this webinar program. I wholeheartedly welcome our respected Dean Sir, Vice Principal Madam, Medical Superintendent Sir, Deputy Medical Superintendent Sir, Controller of the Examiner Dr. P.M. Subramaniam Sir, and Academic Director Dr. Dhansegar Sir to this webinar program. Welcome Sir, welcome Madam. It gives me a very proud moment to welcome our chief guest, Dr. Balaji, who is from Tagore Medical College, Orcha Sir, Professor and HOD of Department of Community Medicine, and he has a lot of experiences in conducting researches. And he has published so many articles, actually too many articles, and he has a very vast experience in conducting research. So he will be the apt person to deliver the statistics part in community biomedical research. I welcome you, sir. I also welcome all the faculty members from Annapurna Medical College, all the faculty members from other medical colleges, the junior residents, the senior residents, the CRRIs, and the students of Annapurna Medical College and other colleges. I welcome you all. So this webinar will be presented to all the audience with the intent to orient about the biostatistics, the basics of biostatistics in biomedical research. On behalf of Department of Community Medicine, I wholeheartedly welcome all of you for this webinar program. Thank you, Manoj. Now I invite Professor Dr. Dhansegar Sir to deliver the introductory speech for the guest speaker.
Thank you, Dr. Ibrahim. Good morning. Professor Dr. Balaji Arumugam has graduated from Government Mohan Kumar Mangalam Medical College, Salem in 2002 and completed his post-graduation in community medicine from Madras Medical College, Chennai in 2008. Also, he has done a diploma course in industrial health from Ananda University. He has got a vast experience in public health, as mentioned earlier, medical education and research, and he is an editor and a reviewer in many community medicine journals and a member of IEC, IRC, and IAPSM. He has been an editor and co-author in 7 community medicine books so far, to his credit. He has presented more than 100 research papers and publications and won an Outstanding Scientist Award and many such awards to his credit. Recently, he had been a resource person in the International CME on COVID-19 vaccination, and he was the best presenter also. Presently, he is working as Professor and HOD of Community Medicine Department, Tagore Medical College and Hospitals, Chennai. Now I request Professor Dr. Balaji Arumugam to present and share his vast expertise on statistics in biomedical research. Thanks for the opportunity. Welcome, sir.
Thank you so much, sir. Very good morning to one and all. First of all, at the outset, I would like to thank everyone for inviting me to talk on this topic, statistics in medical research. Special thanks to our Dr. Somasundram sir, Professor, Community Medicine. Thank you so much for inviting me, sir. So, thank you so much for that nice introduction, sir. It was introductory speech and also introduction about me. It was very nicely done. Thank you so much for introducing, sir. It was very nice to hear. So I would like to thank Professor P. Shanmugam, Dean, sir, and Professor Dr. N. Mohan, sir, and Professor Dr. B. Usha, Vice Principal, Madam, and also our Chairperson, Professor Dr. V. M. Somasundram, sir, for giving me such a wonderful opportunity for delivering the lecture on medical statistics and medical research. So, before going to the PowerPoint presentation of my today's session, sir, I would like to ask, sir, am I audible very clearly, sir? Should I have to increase my volume?
Yes, sir.
Should I have to increase my little bit volume, sir? Am I audible, sir?
Yes, sir. Clear, sir.
Audible, sir. Audible.
Thanks a lot, sir. Thanks a lot, sir. So I will start sharing my screen. I will proceed with the presentation. So can you all see my PowerPoint, sir?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. I have started my slideshow. So this starts from. So my topic is actually today's topic is going to be an application of statistics in medical research. How are we going to apply the statistical methods, various statistical methods in medical research in order to get some conclusions about our medical research topics? So me, Dr. Balaji, PS Professor and HOD from Talur Medical College, going to deliver on this topic. So a few points or a background about what is the purpose of this particular lecture or this particular session is, as we all know, statistics is very important and fascinating subject with growing applications in most academic disciplines. Most academic disciplines in the sense it has got the widespread fundamentals in the life of medicine, engineering, technology, bioinformatics, economics, finance, everywhere statistics. Biostatistics, we deal with biostatistics, but generally statistics is there in all the field of specialties. So because of its widespread use, it is important to comprehend the basics of statistical reasons, its principles, methods, and practices. Right? So I repeat this point. As we all know, see COVID situation, every day and night we talk about statistics. How many number of cases, how many number of deaths, how many people they have got benefited because of vaccination. Everything is in terms of numbers. So statistics, without statistics, even in medical research, hereafter it will be very difficult to comprehend certain things. So in order to, because of this widespread use, it's important to comprehend. It is not only knowing the various tests as such, it is very important to become or to be aware about or to know a little bit more in detail about basic statistics and its reasoning and principles and methods and practices. So as I told you, the world has changed, especially this COVID situation has given so much of importance of community medicine and public health practices. So when you can measure, see the Lord Kelvin always used to say that when you can measure what you are speaking about and express in terms of numbers, you know something about it. But when you cannot measure it or when you cannot express it in terms of numbers, your knowledge is becoming bigger and it becomes unsatisfactory kind. So this is a very important saying said by Lord Kelvin. So unless we have numbers, all we know is just stories or experiences, views and perspectives. See, these stories, views or perspectives has to be converted into numbers. Some statistical tests has to be performed and we need to create some evidence for supporting your own stories, views or perspectives, which we call statistically as null hypothesis. Okay. So for instance, your description of a population as a large, poor, unhealthy, small, or whatever, that is maybe adequate for a common man. But for a policy maker or an administrator or a manager, it is of very little use. So what are we supposed to do? He needs to know how many people will live if we spend so much of money or if we spend so much of budget on this particular program or on this particular event. How many people, how many lives will be saved? How many people are actually currently living? How much disease can be prevented? So these things are mainly important to allocate the resources for the needed actions. So statistics is everywhere. It is very important to know how many importantly to allocate the resources for the needed actions, especially for the administrator and the policy maker. So what are some statistical statements? As I told you just now, if you can't make in terms of numbers, as I said just now, so we need to convert our sentences or stories in terms of statistical statements. I'll tell you some of the examples for statistical statements. As for example, people who drink alcohol, as we know, the chance of getting accidents when they drive is much more. So it can be expressed like this. So people who drink alcohol are almost twice likely to have automobile accidents as people who do not drink alcohol. So the important keyword here is twice. So we are giving some numbers and you are trying to hypothesize that automobile accidents are more common if you drink and drive. So that is the thing that we are trying to propose in terms of numbers. Similarly, another example, use of antibiotics reduces the duration of infection by 2 days or 3 days or whatever, right? So this in terms, again, it gives in terms of numbers. And 2/3 of the adult population are overweight or obese. So these are all the statistical statements. See, as a medical person, as a medical researcher, or even a doctor, we are supposed to use these statistical statements everywhere in order to give weightage to our sentences so that it becomes very important. Okay. So these are some of the examples for statistical statements. As we know, statistical, we have been talking about this importance of statistics in medical research. Just an overview once again, as we know, it is extensively used in biomedical research. As we know, many faculties, many postgraduate students might have joined in this seminar, this webinar. Any medical journal, when you take and read, right? So the role of statistical methods is very, very importantly given in all the journals. As we know, all postgraduates, you are all supposed to present a thesis, publish a paper, or present a paper. It has become mandatory according to the NMC guideline. So any medical journal, if you take, the role of statistical methods is becoming very important, especially in modern medical research. Like for example, some of the statistical tests like t-test, chi-square test, ANOVA, or any other correlation, regression, many statistical tests are there. Of course, I'm not going to discuss in detail about all the statistical methods today. What I'm going to discuss as a panelist today is mainly an overview of statistical tests and the importance of the statistical tests in terms of the p-value. Okay, right? So how it is important in epidemiology and research? See, one of our introduction speaker was talking about the importance of research methodology. Research methodology is a discipline where this epidemiological principles and statistical methods, they coincide into a single discipline we call the research methodology. Overall viewpoint, it says that research methodology includes both epidemiological principles as well as statistical methods. So epidemiology, as we know, it addresses the frequency, determinants, distribution, and control of disease in human population. So statistical analysis is used, especially in a geographical distribution, in order to find the incidence and its relationship to a potential risk factors, which has an important role to play various kind of public health and epidemiological studies. Okay, so statistics is not only important to finance or economics or any other technology, any other specialties or any other branches. It has become a very important thing in our biomedical, especially the medical field also, right? Misuse of statistics. See, this is a very broader perspective. I want to highlight on this misuse of statistics before the end of my presentation. Actually, I wanted to present this particular slide at the end of my presentation, but we are giving sometimes we give more importance to statistics, especially we are misusing the statistics. We means in the sense, especially when we publish in our article or journal article in publication process, sometimes we take simple or very smaller sample and we do faulty generalizations to the general population or overall population. Yes, that is a most common misconception or misuse of statistics, which because as a reviewer for almost more than 10 years in many medical international journals, I used to see this. They would have done some very simple sample, smaller sample of 32 or 20 or 30, but they will generalize the entire country. Such sort of faulty generalization has become very common. That is very common, most important misuse of statistics, which should never be done. And using of statistical inappropriate statistical methods, or maybe using the statistical methods to give a causal statement. Hope all of you know about causal statement. Causal statement in the sense cause and effect relationship, right? So statistical methods sometimes cannot be directly utilized for giving a causal statement. That is not a proper thing. So that is very important. Second important misuse. Okay. And use of inappropriate statistical methods, like wherever needed, we are supposed to use medians, but many people they use means, right? So that is also important misuse. And sometimes use of percentages without even telling the denominator, referring to the total numbers. And also the misuse related to the significant tests, like manipulation of statistical tests, especially it has become very, maybe I should not say very common, it has become common, especially after this booming of this statistical softwares. So as we all know, statistical softwares, it just, you can give the command, it will give you whatever the results or whatever you intend to get or not to intend to get, all the results will come up in the output column, right? But your human brain is very important to interpret, and how to use this test is very important, right? So the important message before I go into the presentation today is, please do not misuse statistics, use it properly. Okay, right? I actually wanted to keep this slide as the last slide. Maybe I will repeat this slide once again. So let us go to the objectives of the session today. So we are moving on towards the objectives of the session. So I'm going to mainly describe the various types of data and differentiate between the descriptive and the inferential statistics. And participants should be able to state the null hypothesis for their research project, enumerate and identify various statistical tests for hypothesis testing, right? So it's an overall broad bird's eye view which I'm going to give you, right? Maybe in future, if people want another presentation, I will go to the next level of presenting each and every statistical test. But the objectives of this today's session is going to be on describing the different types of data, differentiate between descriptive and inferential statistics, state the null hypothesis, and enumerate and identify various statistical tests for your hypothesis testing. Yeah, let us start with basic definition of biostatistics. As it is all known, science and art of collecting, compilation, presentation, analysis, summarizing, and interpretation of numerical data concerned with biological events, which we call it as a biostatistics, right? So I'm going to discuss each and every word here in this next half an hour or 45 minutes presentation, right? So data, what are the types of data? What are the various types of data? The various types of data are, to begin with, very simple or basic types of data, primary and secondary data. The data which directly obtained from the individual is called as primary data. Secondary data that is obtained from the outside source or from the records is called as secondary data. So it can also be classified like this. So primary data is usually obtained from the person by survey, mail, or telephone or whatever, or it can also be obtained directly with the observation, or you can do some experiment or make some measurement and obtain the data. So these are all the sources of primary data. And secondary data, as I said, it is all obtained from the records, maybe from the textbook or journal or library, government documents, all these things will give you the secondary data. So data can also be classified into quantitative and qualitative types. So quantitative, what is the meaning of the word quantitative? Quantitative is nothing but quantify. Quantify is nothing but numerical, right? You are able to express in terms of numbers, which is numerical type of data. Qualitative is, it can just be described, it cannot be given in terms of numbers, right? So quantitative data again divided into two types, which is discrete and continuous. Okay, right? So in further my presentations, in further slides, I will be posting some of the multiple choice questions for discussion purpose. Faculties or postgraduate just for making the session interactive. You can post the answers in the chat box so that I can read the answers from your side. Like I'll give you some 2 to 3 seconds time in between, or I'll be posting some MCQs or some image related questions so that to make it more interactive. Okay, right? So to repeat, quantitative again given into descriptive and continuous, right? So quantitative is nothing but any data that can be expressed or measured in numbers such as height, age, or blood pressure. And qualitative, it cannot be measured or is usually a non-measurable data. So data are observed as individuals belonging to some set of categories like gender, we classify them into male and female, blood groups, right? Blood group A, B, and something like that. And marital status, it can be classified as married, unmarried, single, or whatever, right? So it can only be categories. So qualitative data sometimes it's also called as categorical data. So quantitative data again divided as we have seen in the previous slide, again divided into 2 types, which is discrete and continuous, right? So discrete in the sense variables or data like number of children in the family, number of students in the classroom, or number of participants those who are there in this particular webinar. These can only take in terms of numbers. It cannot be given in terms of fractions, right? 112.5 participants are there. It cannot be expressed like that. It can only be whole numbers. So the data which can take whole numbers is called as discrete data, and the data which takes fractions or it has got wide range of application, wide range of data from sometimes ranging from 0 to infinity we call it as, and also including some fractional values. These data are called as continuous data. So continuous data, example, height, weight, age, blood pressure, blood cholesterol. So these data are measurable and also it can range from wide range of variables, and it also takes fractions. So this is called as continuous data. Yeah, then we have some 4 scales of measurement in addition to the types of data, quantitative and qualitative. And now we are having 4 scales of measurement. When you collect the data from the individual, when you do a clinical trial or when you do a survey or whatever, right? We have some set of questions, right? We have some set of measurements. So those measurements you classify into 4 important things, which we call it as nominal, ordinal, interval, and ratio, right? So what does nominal data? Nominal data is nothing but a set consists of unordered categories. This is very, very important point. Unordered categories. So we have some categories, but it is not ordered maybe in the ascending or descending order. If it carries an order, it becomes an ordinal data. That's it, right? So there is no intrinsic order exist. So it can be binary. Suppose if the nominal data, it can be binary. Say for example, gender, right? It is male and female. Now we have got transgender also. But suppose if you have got any questions, if you are asking the questions, right? Do you use a smart mobile? Yes or no? Yes or no is a binary data. Yes or no? We have only 2 outcomes, right? So only 2 outcomes. It is called as binary data, or it is also called as dichotomous data. Okay, right? So ordinal, which I said, it carries some set of ordered categories. Ordered means these categories can be arranged in some order, like either decreasing order or increasing order or whatever, right? Suppose at the end of the class, when I'm asking you this question, see, are you all, what is your satisfactory level? What is your satisfactory level in terms of my quality of presentation or whatever? Like suppose if you say that unsatisfactory, satisfactory, not interested in answering or whatever, then maybe other end you can say that very well satisfied. So this carries some order, isn't it, right? And there will be some neutrality also in between if possible, right? So similarly, for degree of pain, we are classified as mild, moderate, and severe. And similarly, opinion about birth control, all these things carry a order. So it is ordinal data, right? And next is, so nominal and ordinal, just forgot, right? Nominal and ordinal, they say they both the scale of measurement, they are qualitative type of data, right? Qualitative, which cannot be measured, but the individuals inside the each categories can be grouped or it can be numbered, right? So that is qualitative. So nominal and ordinal are qualitative in nature. And interval and ratio. Interval, the name itself says an interval. So what does it mean? Interval. Interval means there is a difference between one data and another data. So when you can find out the difference until unless the data is measurable data, right? So it is precise numerical interpretation. Sometimes it will not have 0. Sometimes it will have 0, right? So if it has 0, it is ratio. If it doesn't have 0, classical example we use for interval is temperature, right? So temperature can be measured, so it becomes a quantitative data. And say for example, 39 degrees centigrade, what does it mean? With reference to 0 is 39 degrees centigrade. 0, what does it mean? 0 does not imply absence of temperature. 0 is nothing but a freezing point, okay, right? So there will be no absolute 0 in interval, but there will be a 0 also will be there in ratio. And the important thing is the multiples can be interpreted, right? So 60 kg versus 120 kg, what does it mean? It is twice the weight known as a ratio scale. So there you have got 2 times, 3 times. When you can express in terms of those numbers, it becomes a ratio, right? So nominal and ordinal, they are qualitative in nature. Integral and ratio are quantitative in nature, right? So do we need to know in such detail about all these types of data? Yes. When you are doing a thesis or a research project, or for publication, or for your promotion, if you are doing a research project, you need to know what type of data that you are collecting. This is very, very important. That's why I'm taking a little more time on this. For some of the audience or participants, it may be a little boring or it may be very basic for the participants, but this is very, very important because last 5 to 10 slides, if you have to understand last 5 to 10 slides of my presentation, these first 4 to 5 slides are very important. Okay, right? So integral and ratio are quantitative, nominal and ordinal are qualitative, right? So from next slide onwards, I'm going to have some question and answers. Participants, they can answer the questions in the chat box. Okay, it's all going to be very simple questions, and most numbered or most answered faculty or postgraduate will definitely get a prize. I propose Dr. Somasundaram sir to give some prize for the participants, those who are answering. This is just to make more interaction. Okay, right? You can post the answers in the chat box. So the first important question, a physician, after examining a group of patients for a certain disease, classifies the condition into a normal, mild, moderate, and severe, right? So what is the scale of measurement which is being adapted for classification of this disease condition? We have seen 4 important scales of measurements. We have seen, sir, kindly go to the chat box, sir. And if any other faculties are there, you can please go through the chat box. Okay, I can also go through. Yes, I'm getting a lot of right answers. Very good, very good. I'm getting a lot of good answers. Right, it is ordinal. It is an ordinal data, right? Because it carries an order, right? So many answers. I'm getting very nice participants. Very good. So see, at least even if I don't hear your voice, if I see the chat box, so many people are typing the answers. It gives very enthusiasm for the presenter, right? So we'll go to the next question now. Many participants said the right answer. The answer is ordinal scale. Okay, right. The next question. An investigator researcher goes or does the research on IV drug users and divides the group into HIV positive and HIV negative groups. So what is this type of data? So finally, the researcher divides them into 2 groups. Okay, right? HIV positive and HIV negative. So what is this type of data? Is it qualitative or quantitative? Or suppose if you want to go for qualitative, what type of data it is? Is it in scale of measurement? It is qualitative because we have only 2, HIV positive, HIV negative. So yes or no, it is if you want to go in a little more detail, it is also called as binary data or dichotomous data, right? I'm getting a lot of fantastic answers here. Yes, it is qualitative. Yes, nominal, very good, nominal. It is nominal. It doesn't carry any order, isn't it, right? We are just dividing them into HIV positive and negative. So it is nominal data. Very good answers I'm getting. Thank you so much, participants. So in the statistical literature data, broadly classified as I said just now. So blood groups will be an example for what? While discussing, I told you this example. Blood groups will be an example for what type of data? What type of data? Which means is it a nominal, ordinal, or is it a qualitative quantitative? Nominal, qualitative, nominal, qualitative. Yes, very good. Why can't it be ordinal? Can it be ordinal? It cannot be ordinal because it doesn't carry any order. Okay, right. Thank you. Thank you. It is nominal data. Blood groups AB or whatever. It is a nominal data. It doesn't carry any order, right? Thank you so much. So which of the following variables is measured on the nominal scale? Type of anemia, severity of anemia, hemoglobin levels, serum ferritin levels. Which of the following variables is measured on the nominal scale? Which one? Yes. Type of anemia. Very good. Severity, it carries some order because mild, moderate, and severe, it is ordinal data. Hemoglobin and serum ferritin level, it is a quantitative data. It is a quantitative data. hemoglobin levels, serum ferritin, they are interval data. Sometimes you can also say that serum ferritin level can never be zero, so it can be a ratio also, right? So type of anemia is the correct answer for this question. Okay, right. Thank you. Thank you so much for your wonderful answers, my dear participants. That's so nice of you to get some of the answers in this virtual platform. It's very difficult for the presenters to keep the session very interactive, right? Let us move on to the next important aspect of the today's presentation is data collection. See, having known about the various types of data, we are having some data collection methods for qualitative and quantitative, right? So for quantitative data collection method, we have face-to-face interview, questionnaire. Questionnaire can be sent by online, mail, Google Forms, as you all know, many in WhatsApp groups, daily one faculty or any one of the persons from throughout India doing a survey and sending a Google form for getting the data, right? So that is also a quantitative data collection method, questionnaire method, face-to-face interview, and direct measurement. All these things are quantitative data collection methods, right? So qualitative data collection methods, two important or most commonly used qualitative data collection methods are focus group discussions. Focus group discussions and also in-depth interviews and online in-depth interviews also, panel discussions, all these things also can come under qualitative data collection methods, right? So my dear participants, you're all supposed to know first, after deciding what type of topic that you are going to do or whatever, next important thing is what are the types of data that you are going to collect and how are you going to collect, which means what is the data collection method, which is we used to sometimes say it as data collection tool, or sometimes they used to say that data instrument or maybe the study instrument. They used to call it as study instrument. Questionnaire most of the time we used to give the name as study instrument. Okay, right? So I'm moving on to the next slide. Now moving on to the second important objective, the differentiate between the descriptive statistics and inferential statistics, right? So descriptive statistics, as I said, yes, you have known what type of data that you are collecting. And next important step in that, you have known what type of data collection method that you are going to perform. So now, after collecting, what you are going to do, you are going to organize the data, summarize it, and present it, describe in terms of means or averages or variability. So till this section, which is called as descriptive statistics. Descriptive statistics. So you have collected the data. Now you are going to present it, organize it, summarize it, label it, or maybe you can present it as a bar diagram, whatever. So that is called as data presentation method. And also, if you want to make it as a single data, that is, you can make it as a statistical averages on these things. In addition to statistical averages, you also do degree of variability or measures of dispersion, right? So these are the data presentation methods, right? So you have various methods. I will rush through these slides because nowadays MS Excel, PowerPoint, or any other software you go now, you will immediately get all these graphs, pictures, and everything. But as an interpreter, as a reviewer, or as a publisher of your own article, you are supposed to know what type of data, what type of presentation that you are supposed to do. That is very, very important, right? See, most of the time in thesis, when I do thesis corrections, I used to see a lot of inappropriate data presentation methods. So please avoid such a kind of presentations when you present, okay, right? So that is the purpose of this presentation, especially on data presentation aspects, right? So tabulation, as we know, this is a traditional method of data tabulation. Tabulation everyone do, but the important thing is it should be numbered. When you present in journal, the table has to be numbered and the title has to be given very clearly, and this table numbers has to be properly mentioned in the main text. Okay, that's also very important, right? And headings for the column and rows should be very clearly given so that the reader, as soon as he sees the table, he should be able to interpret what type of data that you are presenting as a table, right? And properly, most commonly, please present it orderly, either as an alphabetical order or some chronological order, please maintain, so that if you see the table, immediately you can come to some sort of interpretation, right? And please try to give footnotes if you are getting information from others. See, these are very basics. You may be thinking that many participants may be thinking, sir, these are all very basic. Why you are boring us? Of course, these are all very basics. But most of the time, as a reviewer, many of the journals when I review, except the table numbers, sometimes table titles are also not properly given by the researcher. Please avoid and use these methods very clearly, right? The next is, if we have a huge number of observations, The simple table can be converted into a frequency distribution table. It can be presented like this as a class interval, and try to keep these class intervals equal, because when you look at these numbers, you are coming to a conclusion that, or maybe an interpretation that 10 to 14 years age group, the population is much more high, or the population is much more, or the frequency number is more, right? In order to give such an interpretation, you need to keep these class intervals equal. That is very, very important, right? So this is very, how many individuals observations are in a group, and main concentration, range also you can elicit, and also the shape of distribution if possible, if you convert this frequency distribution into a graph. Okay, right? So this is frequency distribution table. Then graphical presentation, visual presentation makes it more interesting and meaningful impression immediately, right? Bar diagram, as you all know, many people they adapt bar diagram for all sorts of data. We do bar diagram. Please avoid. Please try to use only the qualitative data. You try to present it in with bar diagrams. Okay, right? So variables are depicted as bars. All these things you know, equilibrium. You need not know all these points, because when you feed all these numbers, the software is going to give you the fantastic bar diagram, right? But you are supposed to give the command whether you need a simple bar chart, or a component bar chart, or compound bar chart, or a proportional bar chart, right? So it's all in depth. So I don't want to go in detail about bar chart, bar diagram. It's all self-explanatory. I'm moving on to the next important MCQ. I expect the answer from the audience. A pictorial diagram of frequency distribution. Is it a bar diagram? Is it a histogram? Is it a frequency polygon, or is it a pictogram? Expecting the answer from the chat box. A pictorial. See, we have presented a frequency distribution table. See, that frequency distribution table, how will you present it in a graphical presentation? I've got two answers. C, bar, histogram. Absolutely, my dear participants, the answer is actually the histogram. Okay, right? So a pictorial diagram of frequency distribution can be presented both by histogram as well as by frequency polygon, right? So, but in order to draw a frequency polygon, you need a histogram, right? Just few points about histogram. It's an area diagram. As we know, the rectangles like bar chart, here also we have some rectangles or bars or whatever we call it as. So the area covered by the individual block represents the frequency of that particular variable. We have x-axis and y-axis. X-axis we always have class intervals. Y-axis we have frequency, right? The histogram, the biggest advantage of histogram, it can also deal with unequal class intervals, because even if the class intervals are broader or unequal, but the bars are kept according to the breadth of the or size of the class interval. So that unequal class intervals, we can very well use this histogram, right? So this is a sample histogram. And frequency polygon, as I said just now, the midpoints of all the histogram blocks are joined, and then it is being converted into a frequency polygon. Okay. And line diagram, very important line diagram. Many most common graphical presentation I used to see is pie chart and bar chart, right? Even for quantitative data, I have seen many people presenting bar chart. Better to go for this line diagram, which will give you the trend of the events over a period of time. This is very, very nice diagram, which is maybe I can say that very underutilized diagram by many of the postgraduates, right? Underutilized. So best form of graphical presentation is the line diagram. So trend of events can be immediately see. Look at this TB death and malaria death. You can just verify immediately, see the different colors and find out. Okay. So trend of the events can be found in the line diagram. And scatter diagram, very important. Scatter plot. It's also called a scatter diagram, correlation diagram, or scatter plot. Here the important thing is, here also we can use this for quantitative data. So the rate of change of one variable in the x-axis, what happens to the variable in the y-axis? That is very commonly represented by scatter diagram. That is dependent variable depicted on the y-axis, and the independent variable is depicted in the x-axis. The example here it is given. Say here it is stress score. We can also take it as a salt intake and increase in blood pressure, right? Salt intake can be quantified and blood pressure can also be measured, right? So this is scatter diagram. Pie chart, most of the time it is used for percentages. Pictogram, name itself says it is pictogram, popular method for presenting into for illiterate people, or sometimes it is also be presented, sometimes you cannot express in terms of numbers, it can be represented in terms of pictograms. So the methods of various presentations are qualitative and quantitative. For qualitative, as I said, better, see, we can interchange the data and present it in qualitative, quantitative for any other data, but better, right? So bar diagram, pie chart, and pictogram most commonly used for example, qualitative data. And for quantitative, as I said, histogram, polygon, frequency curve, and line diagram is category. Many more curves and presentations are there. As I said, I'm just presenting the basics of presentation. So best method to show the association, time for the participants to enter into the chat box. The best method to show the association between height and weight of children in a class. Height and weight. What type of data is these two, or what type of data? Yes, good. So much of answers. 10, 11. The number is increasing. Scattered. Yes. Thank you. So the best method to show the association between height and weight is actually both are quantitative data. So it can be presented in terms of scatter diagram. Trends can be represented by trends. Just now I said trend of event over a period of time. It can be represented by what type of presentation method? Line. Yes, line. Yes, it is line diagram. Thank you so much for your participation, my dear participants. So it is line diagram, trends. And the best graphic presentation of frequency distribution of data gathered of a continuous variable. Please read the words very carefully. Frequency distribution. The data is already a large data. We have a frequency distribution, but the variable is a continuous variable. What is continuous variable? We have two types of data under quantitative, discrete and continuous. The continuous, as I said, it has got wide range. At the same time, it has got some fractions. We have said, okay, right now, this point is about frequency distribution for a continuous variable. What is the answer now? Let me check out in the chat box. D. Multiple bar 9. Sorry, it's not multiple bar. D. Multiple bar 9. It is histogram. Not even line diagram, my dear participant. It is histogram. The question is best. The best graphic presentation of frequency distribution of data gathered of a continuous variable. That is the keyword, continuous variable. So it is histogram. Okay, right? It is histogram. So now moving on to the next little more on statistics, right? So we have measures of channel tendency, descriptive statistics. I said 4 important words, right? You are organizing, summarizing, and also you are converting the entire distribution of data in terms of 1 or 2 single information or data when you convert. That is called as measures of channel tendency and also measures of dispersion, right? The measures of channel tendency is also called as statistical averages. Most commonly used is mean, median, mode. Mean is arithmetic mean, harmonic mean, geometric mean. I'm not going to talk about all these three. I'm just going to talk about arithmetic average or mean here, right? So arithmetic mean, the important advantage is useful measure, most useful measure. Say mean age of my study population. You can easily say that, right? So mean age, and most commonly used is mean age in the study population. When you want to describe mean score most commonly used. But the important problem is about mean NNR. It is influenced by presence of extreme values. I'll tell you what is the presence of extreme values. This is what is important, my dear students. When you have an extreme value in your distribution when you collect the data, please be careful when you are presenting this as mean. So when you have an extreme value, the mean will be automatically shifted towards the extreme value. If it is a positive value, the mean will be shifted towards the positive value. If it is a negative value or the smaller value, the mean will be shifted towards the next side. So that means what does it mean? Mean can be influenced by extreme values either in the right side or on the left side, or maybe you can call it the positive aspect or the negative aspect. So in that situation, we are supposed to use median. Okay, so median will not be affected by extreme values. Okay, so mode, as we know, it is a commonly occurring value, easy to understand. This is called as skewness, negative skewness and positive skewness. Here you can see the extreme value towards the right side, and here the extreme value towards the left side, which we call it as skewness. Postgraduates of community medicine, those who are listening, this is very, very important. Maybe I can say it's a very common statistical 5-mark question or asked as a statistical question here. Skewness, normal distribution. As you all know about normal distribution, I'm not going in detail about those distributions and all those things. This is just for the completion sake. I'm just telling you about the skewness. Okay. Right, here look at this positive skewness. As I said, this is the example. When you collect the data, right, when you look at your data distribution, if there is an extreme value towards the right side, you will have a positive skewness, and you will have a negative skewness if you have a extreme value towards the left. Sir, why do I need all these things? Sir? Yes, it is needed. If you collect the data, my dear participants, check out your distribution very importantly. When you read the entire data or the distribution, whatever that you have, the distribution, I mean that the data that you have collected, right? Say for example, 100 people data that you are collecting. If you have an extreme value of triglyceride towards 1000 plus or something, what will happen to the mean? So at that time, you cannot express the mean triglyceride level of your study participant in terms of mean. So at that time, we can present it only in terms of this answer will give you the, this question will give you the answer for your discussion on mean and median. Yes, my dear participants, expecting the answers in the chat box. The number of malaria cases in the last 10 years, 320, 250, some numbers are given. Go through all the numbers before you answer the question in chat box. Go through the answers. Go through the distribution. 320, some numbers, and sometimes some number 5,000, right? So, most appropriate measure of cell tendency. What is this most appropriate measure of cell tendency here? So many participants are there, but I'm getting just 8 to 10 answers here. If you want, I can wait more time also in order to get more answers. Yes. Yes, median. Yes, very good, my dear students. Yes, it is, my dear participants. It is median because what is the reason? Because the reason is 5,000 is an extreme value that is present there. So better to or most appropriate measure of cell tendency here is median rather than mean. Okay, right? So moving on to a little bit of a measure of dispersion. As you all know, this simple rush through about this measures of dispersion. So averages, when you get an average or a mean, it will just give you only a representative of the total series of data. Suppose 50 plus participants of the data when you are collecting, right? And you can express in terms of one value that is mostly the mean. Okay, right? Suppose it will give you only a representation, but what will happen if you use only the mean? It will not give you the variability of the entire distribution. When you not know the entire variability of the distribution, you need to know about measures of dispersion called range, mean deviation, standard deviation, and coefficient of variation. As you all know, the most commonly used measure of dispersion is range and standard deviation. Right? So let us go a little more detail about inferential statistics, my dear participants. So far, we have spoken about or discussed about or learned about the types of data and then the difference between or the various aspects of this data like collection, compilation, summarizing, measures of central tendency and measures of dispersion. Right? Now, we are gradually moving on towards inferential statistics. This is very, very important aspects of any medical research. Okay, right? So what are we supposed to do or what are we going to infer in inferential statistics? We have a population. We have to collect the data from a population, right? So what is the data or some number of people that you are going to choose from the population is called as what? Are you all following me? Those who are following can answer now in chat box. Do we have a huge set of population? Yes, sample. It is called as a sample, right? We have a huge set of numbers. From that huge set of numbers, we take some people for your study because it is humanly not possible to study the entire population, right? So we take some sample or some numbers, right? We call it as a random sample. And you measure the data on that particular sample, isn't it? That is what we always do. This is very important aspect. All the participants, please listen, right? So you take the sample and then what do you calculate? You calculate some data or you measure some information about a particular sample. Say, for example, you measure the sample mean blood pressure. Okay, right? So mean blood pressure, what are we going to do? You are going to infer or generalize or extrapolate. All these three words mean the same, right? What you are going to infer? You are going to infer something about the total population in relation to the sample which you have chosen for your study pertaining to your data, right? Say, for example, you are doing you are trying to introduce a new drug. You want to know the efficacy of the new drug in decreasing the blood pressure, right? You are dividing the groups into two, right? One is the experimental group, another group is control group, right? So what is the mean blood pressure decrease among people, those who have chosen the new drug and those who have taken the older drug, right? So you are going to find out and tell us that mean difference is high and you can say that the new drug is more efficacious. That means you are trying to create the statistical evidence in support of your clinical evidence and you are going to extrapolate the findings of this particular sample of 30 or 50 to the overall population of some numbers, right? So this is what we call it as inferential statistics, right? You are going to infer the sample statistics towards your general population, right? So when you are doing the inferential statistics or when you are doing the inference, we have to be very careful, okay, right? So inferential statistics, it attempts to generalize the findings obtained from studying a few people to the total population, or it determines, you can say that it determines whether the conclusion based on the observations on the sample, right, what you have taken as a sample, are likely to be correct or false, are likely to be correct or false in relation to the population, right? Are likely to be true or false in relation to the population, are likely to be, I'm just repeating the same sentence. This is what where we talk about null hypothesis. You create your own hypothesis and you say that whether you accept or reject your hypothesis. The same sentence is expressed in terms of you collect the sample, you get the information from the sample, and you determine whether the conclusion based on the observations on the sample are likely to be true or false in relation to the population, right? So the types of sampling, in order to choose the sample, no, very, very important, we need to scientifically sound enough to choose a sample. Okay, that's very, very important, my dear participants. We have two types of sampling methods. I'm just going to brush through again. I'm telling you here. We have two types of sampling methods, non-probability and probability sampling methods, right? Let us talk about non-probability. What is probability? As you all know, probability is chance, right? Probability is nothing but chance. When I'm tossing a coin, what is the probability of getting one out of two? That means out of total number of events, what is the expected event? So that means chance of getting a particular event in relation to the total, in relation to the total and a denominator, right? So the total, that means you are giving equal chance, also called as probability, also called as likelihood. All these things are same. So in probability samples, every unit in the population has a known probability of being selected. Very, very important. I have just underlined this word. Sampling methods is again a 5-mark question for all the postgraduates. 5-mark question. It's also been very important for thesis discussion. So every unit in the population has a known probability of being selected. Let me tell you what is the known probability. What does it mean? We'll talk more on the probability sample rather than non-probability sample, right? So probability sample, suppose if we have 100 people, you want to select 10 people out of this 100. How will you select this 10 people out of 100? Right? You can select, maybe you can just name all the, you can write the names all in a piece of paper and put it in the box. Call some person to take randomly. So what will happen when you are choosing the first person? What is the probability of getting the first person? 1 out of 100. 1 out of 100, right? Yes, you have selected the person. You are just folding the paper and keeping it aside. Or if you want to keep it 1 second inside the bowl, also can be done. That is called as replacement sampling and non-replacement sampling. But the key word here is every person or a unit or a household in the study has a known probability of being selected. That is what is happening in probability sampling method. So only the sampling method, probability sampling method, allows to draw a valid conclusion about the population. That's why we always used to say that when I review an article, when I sit as an ARC member or EC member, the first common question, 2 common questions that a community physician or public person will ask you: have you calculated the sample size? What is the sampling method that you have adopted? These 2 are the very common questions. Because if you do not sample or if you do not follow the probability sampling method, your generalizing statement towards the general population or the overall population, it becomes very, very weak. So your hypothesis becomes very, very weak. Okay, so that much of importance is given to the probability sampling. Please, my dear participants, please give importance to the various random sampling methods, which we are going to discuss in the next slide. Non-probability sampling, many names are the convenience sampling, subjective sampling, judgmental sampling, snowball sampling. All these things are examples for non-probability sampling. So let us just discuss about what is the purpose of probability sampling. Random sampling, it is a random sampling. It removes the bias, very important. Why are we very much worried about the probability sampling method is, when you adopt a probability sampling method, it removes the possibility of bias or reduces the possibility of selection bias. Very, very important, right? So you should not have your own judgment towards selecting these people, only selecting these people. That non-judgmental attitude should be there when you are choosing the participants for your study, right? So each subject or unit has a known probability of being chosen, which I have told you just now. Okay, right? There are 4 important points. Many methods are there. random sampling, even multi-stage sampling is also there. 4 commonly used probability sampling methods are simple, systematic, stratified, and cluster, right? So simple random, as I said, it is also called as lottery method. Simple random sampling. You can just select the person from the bowl, or only thing is simple random sampling needs the entire list of participants, entire list of the target population, entire list of reference population needed for simple random sampling. What is systematic? Systemic, it is called a systematic. Systematic random sampling method is every third person, every 10th person, every 5th person, right? So that is what is called a systematic. That is called a sampling interval. I don't want to go in detail about all these things. So next is stratified sampling. Stratified sampling, stratum, as we know, this is grouping, right? You group them according to the naturally existing classification, and you sample or randomly select people from each group. Here, green one group, blue another group. So you select or randomly select people from each stratum. This is called a stratified sampling, right? And cluster sampling is also similar to stratified. It looks similar, but it is not actually similar. So cluster sampling, here what we do, you divide them into clusters or naturally occurring geographical areas or naturally occurring groups, and then you cluster them into according to some variables or something. Suppose if you have got 10 clusters, you randomly select 2 or 3 clusters based on some scientific method or something. So you select 2 or 3 clusters, 2 clusters, 3 clusters, and the entire people inside the cluster will be your study population for your research. Okay, this is called as cluster sampling. There is one more method also called as 2-stage cluster. I don't want to go in detail. These are all 4 commonly used methods. So cluster stage sampling, sometimes if you do it two more times or something, we call it as multi-stage random sampling method. That can also be performed, but it's all dependent on, it's all very important for community-based studies, especially for community medicine researchers, right? So simple random, systematic, stratified, and cluster. So one word, simple random is lottery method, systematic is sampling interval every third or every 3rd person, stratified, you divide them into groups, sample inside the groups. Cluster, divide them into groups or select the clusters in randomly. That is cluster sampling. The fundamentals of inferential statistics. Okay, you have chosen a sample. What you are going to do? You are going to do the or perform the tests of significance, or you create the hypothesis and perform the tests of significance and calculate your p-values. Okay, right? So what type of statistical test that do I want to do? That mainly depends on the basic what we have discussed so far, various types of data. What type of data, based on the what type of data only you can decide that what statistical test that I can perform in order to conclude on for my null hypothesis, right? Yes, now coming on to test of significance, right? So when we select a sample for drawing an inference about the underlying population, it is assumed that sample is representative of the population. What does it mean? It is a null hypothesis. Sample is a representation, which means sample has a similar characteristics of the general population. Hope you are following me. The sample that you have chosen should have the similar characteristics pertaining to the total population or the reference population from which it is being drawn, right? So then it means that sample is a representative of the population, which means we state the null hypothesis, or we say that sample is similar to the population, sample mean is equal to population mean, sample proportion is equal to population proportion. This is what we call as a null hypothesis. That means there is no difference, or null is nothing but no difference. So to check whether your null hypothesis is true or false, we do some tests. Those tests are called as tests of significance. I'm going to discuss, as we all know, we have so much of tests, statistical tests are there, especially in this modern software world. Even I don't know many statistical tests, but I'm going to discuss simple statistical test, which is commonly used by postgraduates and also in journals, right? So we classify the statistical test into 2 broad categories, parametric and non-parametric tests, right? So in order to test your null hypothesis, what is the purpose of these tests? In order to test your null hypothesis, whether it is true or false, or whether you want to accept or reject your null hypothesis, you perform certain tests. Those tests are called as parametric and non-parametric tests. So once you perform this parametric and non-parametric, I'll tell you what are the differences between these two. And in order to perform, after performing this test, you will have a p-value. You will find out a p-value. So there is nothing but probability of acceptance of null hypothesis, and you will decide on null hypothesis whether you are going to accept or reject null hypothesis, right? So tests of significance are done to conclude or decide on the null hypothesis. Okay, right. So what is null hypothesis? Hypothesis is a default assumption. Everyone please listen to this sentence. It is a default assumption about the population, usually that there is no difference. As I said, no, three sentences most commonly used. Sample is a representative of the population, and assume that sample is similar to the population, or you assume that there is no difference between the sample and the population. All these three sentences are pertaining to or commonly used to describe or to define null hypothesis. Examples for null hypothesis. In order to make the clinicians, participants to understand what is null hypothesis, if you have chosen a topic, right, you want to find out the efficacy of a new drug introduction, blood pressure, right? You are taking the sample, right? As I said, experimental group and control group, right? Group A and group B. So mean blood pressure, you measure the blood pressure before and after, and then find out whether what is happening with the treatment group and what is happening with the blood pressure levels in the control group, right? So mean blood pressure is same among two groups. What are the two groups? Group A and group B. Group A is an experimental group. Group B is a control group, right? Or a placebo or whatever, right? So mean blood pressure is same among two groups, taken the new drug and the older drug. So when you want to do a statistical test, you always start with the null hypothesis, perform the statistical test, and find out whether your null hypothesis is accepted or rejected. Okay, right? So just the opposite, most of our researchers or most of our PG thesis people or PG students and faculty, those who come and talk to me, first point they ask me, no sir, please give me the appropriate p-value so that I can accept the alternate hypothesis. See, that means already you have that conclusion towards hypothesis and performing the research. Please never do that. Okay, right? Always start with null hypothesis, stating that there is no difference, and then find out the answer with the help of p-value, whether you accept or reject the null hypothesis, right? So similarly, proportion of severity of lung involvement. This is one of the theses done by our postgraduate. I'm just proposing the hypothesis here. Proportion of severity of lung involvement is same among people those who are vaccinated and not vaccinated, right? So this is a statistical or null hypothesis statement. You perform the test and find out whether you accept the null hypothesis. If you accept means, what does it mean? No difference is accepted. If you reject means no difference is rejected, so that you can say that yes, there is a difference between severity of lung involvement among people those who got vaccinated and those who have not got vaccinated, right? So this is how you derive the clinical evidence based on the statistical evidence, especially with the help of p-value. And the next important thing is confidence interval. I'm not going to talk about confidence interval in this session. I'm just going to talk about only the p-value. So confidence interval, in addition to confidence interval, it gives more weightage. Many of the journals, international journals, expect both your p-values as well as your confidence intervals. Okay, right? Here I'm going to talk mainly about p-value, right? So what is p-value? As I said just now, it is an evidence in support of a null hypothesis. Please be careful in reading this sentence, my dear participants. Evidence in support of a null hypothesis. It is not the evidence that you are creating to support your causal outcome. Hope all of you are following my sentence, right? Are you all feeling sleepy, my dear participants? In further 2-3 slides, you are all going to have some multiple choice questions for discussion. Okay, right? So the evidence in support of a null hypothesis is measured in terms of p-value. Okay, right? It is not the evidence for your causal experiment or for the causal association. You are just creating the evidence to support your null hypothesis. Okay, right? In terms of p-value. So the conclusion is universally accepted or derived value for p is p less than 0.05, p more than 0.05. More than 0.05, it is known that it is not significant. What is not significant? What is not significant? There is no difference between the sample and the population, or there is no difference between the sample beings among the control group and the experimental group. So you accept the null hypothesis. What does it mean? You accepting the null hypothesis? No difference is accepted. So there is no difference. Okay, right? So acceptance of null hypothesis does not mean that the hypothesis is proved. And similarly, it means it is being supported by this sample in this study. Okay, right? Similarly, if the p-value is less than 0.05, you reject the null hypothesis. See, most of the PGs and faculties only these two sentences they understand. The importance of red font is very important here. Okay, right? So rejecting the null hypothesis does not mean that the hypothesis is totally disproved. It means that sample value, whatever the value that you have derived from your study, does not support the hypothesis in your study. So this is what I'm trying to say, that do not give any faulty generalizations. This is what I said, misuse of statistics, right? Just because of your sample has not supported your hypothesis, it doesn't mean that it can never happen in the universe. Okay, right? Please understand the concept of this p-value, right? So I repeat, this p-value more than 0.05 is not significant, which means there is no difference. So you accept the null hypothesis, right? So after accepting the null hypothesis does not mean that the hypothesis is proved. That means your null hypothesis is proved. It means it is supporting, your sample is supporting the study. Okay, right. I want to share this very important sentence. Please read this sentence, my dear participants. I'll take a short break for 3-4 seconds. Please read this sentence. This sentence is related to this red color fonts. Absence of evidence is not evidence of absence, right? So it says P more than 0.05 and P less than 0.05, and it's important, right? So moving on to some basic statistical tests, okay, right? So how to select appropriate statistical test? So before that, you need to ask 3 important questions. Type of data, what type of data that you are dealing with, as I told you, and whether this data or the groups are independent groups, or how many groups that you have got. 3 important questions that you are supposed to answer before you decide what type of statistical test that you are going to perform. That is why we always ask that even in research proposal, many PG research proposals in IRC and IEC, I have seen that appropriate statistical test will be done. No, this is not the way of writing in the proposal, right? You are supposed to write what probable statistical test that you will be performing in this research proposal in order to support your null hypothesis or reject your null hypothesis. That is what is important. Right? Do not write in research proposal as appropriate statistical test will be done. No, it should never be written like that. Okay, that means you are not clear about what type of data that you are going to collect, right? So 3 questions you are supposed to answer: type of data, whether the data is groups are dependent or independent, and how many number of groups. So as I told you, parametric and non-parametric test. Metric, it means measurement. Okay, right? If you are dealing with the measurable data, which is quantitative data, you perform student t-test, set test, or ANOVA, because you are going to express in terms of mean and standard deviation. What are the 2 types of quantitative data? Interval and ratio, they are quantitative data. What are the 2 types of qualitative data? They are nominal and ordinal, right? So nominal and ordinal can be expressed in terms of percentage and proportion, and the most commonly used statistical test is chi-square test in non-parametric test, right? I am not going to discuss other tests. Yes. So 2 independent variables, qualitative, what type of test? Which is nominal. So you perform chi-square test. 2 independent groups, quantitative data, unpaired t-test. 2 related groups, 2 related in the sense paired data, it is nominal. Sometimes 2 related groups, in addition to chi-square test for qualitative data, we do McNemar's test also. And here, quantitative data, paired t-test, you will do quantitative data, 2 related groups. I will tell you with examples, okay? And the third one is more than 2 groups, qualitative chi-square. So the important thing most commonly used for qualitative type of data, it is chi-square test. Okay, right? For quantitative, 2 independent groups go for unpaired t-test. For quantitative data, related groups go for paired t-test. More than 2 groups go for ANOVA. Yes, small or maybe a little bit of description about this statistical test. T-test, it's a parametric test. Where it is applied, how it is applied? It is applied to find out the significant difference between 2 means. So done for randomly selected sample, randomly selected in the sense sample follows a normal distribution, right? So it is a quantitative data we are going to express in terms of mean and standard deviation, which means we are going to express in terms of interval ratios, right? And we have 2 types of t-test, unpaired t-test and paired t-test. Just now I said unpaired t-test, it is done for 2 independent groups. PAT test is done for two dependent groups, especially before and after intervention, right? You want to know the efficacy of the new drug, especially in reduction of blood cholesterol level. We can perform average blood glucose levels, blood cholesterol levels in a group of population, 20 or 30 or something, right? Before and after giving the new drug, what happens? So in that situation, you perform PAT test. And Z test, very important. Here, the sample size should be larger than 30. If the sample size is less than 30, you perform T test. So Z test is a variant of T test, where you perform this test if the sample is more than 30. And ANOVA, as I said, ANOVA is done as for mean and standard deviation if it is more than two groups. Okay, right? To compare the difference between more than two sample means we perform analysis variant, which is called as a ANOVA, also for it's a type of parametric test. So chi-square test is a non-parametric test. It is done to find out the association between two events, especially binomial or multinomial samples. Maybe two samples or two or three samples. Say for example, I said the example here only just now, right? In vaccinated and non-vaccinated group, what is the proportion of lung involvement, severity of lung involvement in vaccinated and non-vaccinated two groups? Supposing if you want to have it as a 3 or 4 groups, say for example, vaccinated single dose, vaccinated 2 doses, non-vaccinated, you can convert into 3 groups. There also you can perform chi-square test. This is what the difference between a binomial sample and multinomial. Multinomial are more than 2. That's it, right? 2 or more groups you can also do. You can also done for 2 groups, and it is done for nominal and ordinal data. Sample size more than 30. If it is less than 30, sometimes the accuracy will not be there. There is a modified version of chi-square test which is performed for sample size less than 30. Yes, now the discussion starts. Participants, all of you please wake up. Hope most of you have been listening to my presentation here. Now, for testing the statistical significance of the difference in heights of school children among 3 socioeconomic groups, the most appropriate statistics. We are almost on the last 5 to 10 slides of the presentation. Now, let us get the answers from the participants from the chat box. For testing the statistical significance of the difference in heights. Height is a type of what type of data? Height is a type of quantitative data. And how many groups are here? There are 3 socioeconomic groups. The most appropriate test is ANOVA. Let me check what I have got. 8 answers out of 168 participants. Yes, ANOVA. ANOVA. Yes. Thank you. It is ANOVA. There is no doubt about it, right? Because the data is collected in terms of quantitative. Height is a quantitative continuous variable. It can be expressed in terms of both mean and standard deviation, and more than 2 groups go for ANOVA. Good. Thanks for the participation. And wait. Next question. Expecting the answers from the participants. I'm not going to read. I'm just going to take some break for 3 to 5 seconds. Participants, please read the question and type the answers in the chat box. I'm going to take 10 more seconds break. Let us wait for all the answers to be typed in the chat box. Any more answers? Most of you are going for chi-square, and one answer I could see that it is proportions and relative risk. Proportions and relative risk. One answer. T-test. How could it be T-test? How could it be T-test? What is the inference regarding T-test? Why are we going for T-test? I'm not also in favor of chi-square test, that we will discuss now. But why it is T-test? The test is, the outcome is measured in terms of the data was collected on number of people who developed cold and those who did not develop cold and tabulated, right? So those who have cold, those who did not have cold, that is the outcome, isn't it, right? So consumption of tea is one aspect, and had cold and not. So had cold and not, what type of data? Had cold or not, what type of data? Is it a qualitative or quantitative? Yes, it is. It is a qualitative data, and also it can also be expressed as a nominal qualitative data, right? So qualitative and nominal. So better to go for, as I said, for all qualitative data. In this presentation, I have presented only chi-square test. We have so many non-parametric tests. Don't think that I don't know all those things. I don't want to discuss in detail because that is going to be a part 2 of my statistics. If at all you want my presentation in the next session or something, I will definitely go for the next statistical test, especially Mann-Whitney test, U-test, Mann-Whitney, U-test test, sign rank test, ransom test, Wilcoxon test, McNemar's test. All those tests are there. Thank you for the answers. Qualitative, it is qualitative and it is nominal. The answer is chi-square test. Thank you. Next. A group tested for a drug shows 60% improvement as against the standard group showing 40% improvement. Some improvement is about something, right? Here expressed in terms of proportions. Somebody has answered as proportions and relative risk. Why is it chi-square? Can anyone type the answer? Parity test. Parity test. Sorry, it is not parity test. The data itself is expressed in terms of proportions. So directly it is given as proportions. Here there is no push up getting the data in terms of mean or standard deviation. So it is not a quantitative data, it is a qualitative data. So qualitative data again, the answer is towards chi-square test. Okay, right? So this is the purpose of my presentation, my dear participants. You have to answer 3 questions. What are those 3 questions? Can anyone type it in the chat box? What are 3 questions which you are supposed to ask in order to find out the statistical test? 3 questions. Someone, those who can answer it correctly, I'll give a very good prize. Qualitative or quantitative? No. Yes. One is qualitative or quantitative. 3 questions. Number of groups. Then type of data. So going in reverse. First one is type of data. Dependent or independent? Type of study 9. No. Sujita, somebody has answered. No, type of data. It is not type of study. It is first one is type of data. Second one is dependent or independent groups. Very good. Dependent or independent groups. And third one is, what is the third one? 2 or more than 2 groups. Okay, right? So try to answer these 3 questions, my dear participants. When you present in research proposal itself, you are all supposed to know what type of data that you are dealing with, how many groups that you are going to divide, and whether these groups are going to be dependent or independent. Okay, right? Thank you for this participation. So next question, I'm moving on to the next question. While testing the hypolipidemic drug, serum lipid levels are tested both before and after its use. I have told you this example just now. Which test is best suited for the statistical analysis of the result? I'll wait for 10 seconds to get the answers. Please explain, my dear students, my dear participants. What is that? Irandu in Tamil. Somebody has typed Irandu in Tamil. Yes. Somebody please tell me, is it a parity test or unparity test? Or what type of data that we are dealing with? Let me ask the question one by one. What type of data that we are dealing with here? Type the answers, please. What type of data? Quantitative, before and after, very good. Vijay Karthikeyan, very good. Jansi, quantitative, yes. Sethupathi, quantitative, yes. It is quantitative because it is serum lipid levels. Serum lipid levels, it is a measurable data, it is a quantitative data. Okay, right? Parity test, sorry sir, thank you, Dr. Rama. Interval scale quantitative, yes, very good. That is what I expect now, very good. So the type of data what we are dealing with is a quantitative data. Whatever is the interval ratio and all is okay, but it is a quantitative, that is very important, right? So when we are dealing with quantitative, we are left with only 2 type of data, which we have 2 type of tests that we have discussed so far. What are those 2 type of tests? Student test, another one is ANOVA or Z test. Okay, right? Here, before and after, that is a very important keyword to say that it is a parity test, which is nothing but Related groups. Dr. Sedapati, yes, thank you. Sedapati is started it. So it is related groups before and after, that means it is the same group, right? Very, very happy about your answers, my dear participants. I'm very happy. Yes, it is happy test. Good. Let us see this question. Again, I take break for 10 seconds. I expect the answers from the participants. I'm not going to read loudly. Please, participants, read the question and give the importance to this bracket words. Those who listen to my presentation, the last, especially last 20 slides, you can very well answer these questions. Maternal intake of iron supplement, yes or no, and birth weight. Okay, right? So collecting the information, sample size is 100, sample size is 100. And what type of statistical test that you will advise? ANOVA, Z-test. How many groups are here? What type of data? Tell me. Please type the answers in the chat box. What type of data that we are dealing with? What is outcome data here? What is outcome data here? Outcome data is birth weight. Binomial, very good. Binomial, that was a very, very nice answer. Binomial, good. It is a nominal data. Outcome, I'm asking about the outcome. Binomial is maternal intake, yes or no, that is binomial. But the outcome here is exposure group is maternal intake, okay, right? That is binomial. My question is, what is the outcome data here? Birth weight, okay, outcome data, birth weight is a quantitative data, okay, right? So outcome data is a quantitative data. Sample size is 100. Yes. Vijay Karthikeyan has answered and some of the other students also answered. Chi-square, please don't answer chi-square. No, we are dealing with quantitative data. Just now I said it is not a qualitative. I am talking about this birth weights. Yes or no is a maternal intake. Yes or no is a maternal intake. Those who have taken and those who have not taken iron supplements versus the birth weight. So birth weight. So birth weight is the outcome. Very good. Thank you. So birth weight is outcome means it is a quantitative data. Quantitative data, 2 groups, and the sample size is 100. So the answer is either it should be t-test or it should be, it cannot be t-test because it should be z-test because the sample size is 100. Okay. Here it is unpaired t-test. You can go for unpaired t-test or you can go for z-test because the sample size is more than 30. Okay, right? Here again, investigator wants to study the association between the maternal intake, same question, but the outcome here measured or divided into 2 groups into low birth weight and normal birth weight. So you are dividing them into 2 categorical data. So categorical again it is nominal. So the statistical it is nominal in the sense it is qualitative. So the answer should be chi-square test. Okay, right? So read the outcome, that is very important. Here also the sample size is 100. Same question, that the weights are directly classified. Here weights are classified into 2 groups. That means you are converting the quantitative into qualitative. That can also be done for your analysis. This is very important for all postgraduates. Kindly note this point. Okay, right? Mean bone density among male and female groups of 30 people. Mean means it is quantitative data. 2 groups, male and female, which is 2 independent groups. Sample size is only 30. So the answer should be unpaired t-test. It is not paired t-test. It is unpaired t-test. Okay. Right. Thank you. Unpaired t-test. And we are almost in the last 2-3 slides of the presentation. Thank you so much for all the participants for participating in the chat box for the answers. So in order to complete last 2-3 slides, we have correlation and regression, right? So correlation, we have a diagrammatic presentation, which is called a scatter diagram. So scatter diagram is also called as correlation diagram, where we depict what are we depicting in scatter diagram. We depict y-axis and x-axis, right? So what are we depicting? We are depicting two random quantitative variables. So the rate of change of one variable, what happens to the another variable, is also measured in terms of extent or degree of relationship is measured between two variables in terms of correlation coefficient. Right here, we don't much rely on p-value, we rely on the R value. Based on the R value, we calculate p-value. Right. So what is p-value? P-value is nothing but probability of acceptance of null hypothesis, or you can say that evidence towards your acceptance of null hypothesis. Okay, right? And what is correlation? Correlation ranges from +1 to -1, R value, right? So -1 is negative association, +1 is positive, 0 is no, right? So there are 5 types. So in that, perfect positive correlations R is equal to 0.9 or maximum 1. Perfect negative is 0.9 minus 0.9, and absolute no correlation or no association 0. Okay, right? And this is the last MCQ, last interactive question for this session. Can anyone answer this question? If you have listened to the previous slide, you can very well answer this question. If the correlation coefficient calculated between height and weight is 1.2, what is the true statement here? Positive. A. Positive. 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 Wrong. Somebody has answered wrong. Why it is wrong? Shetapati, why is it wrong? It can never be more than 1, my dear participants. I've told you in the yes, very good, Dr. Ravikumar. Yes, in the previous slide, if you go through the previous slide, I have told you it ranges from -1 to +1. It cannot be more than 1. Okay, right? Correlation coefficient, it cannot be more than 1. Look at the MCQ here. Here, the correlation coefficient given value is 1.2. The calculation of correlation coefficient itself is wrong here. Just to confuse you and also to wake you up, all the participants, I have given this question. So prediction of value of one character from the knowledge of other character is called as regression. Okay, right? So correlation is nothing but it gives a strength of relationship between one variable and the other variable. Here, you can predict the value of one character from the value of the other character. Say, for example, y is equal to a plus bx is a formula given, but y is a dependent variable. What is y? Y, say, for example, cardiovascular disease is dependent on x. X is the a and b are some coefficients or some regression lines or something, right? X is the smoking. If the smoking increases, what happens to the y? Y is a cardiovascular disease. So cardiovascular disease is dependent on the smoking. Similarly, if you want to use more than 1 or 2 variables, you can use multiple regression or multiple linear regression. Okay, right? So regression models are also commonly used, a little bit sophisticated statistical test apart from parametric and non-parametric test. Correlation regressions are more commonly used for both, especially correlation is more commonly used for quantitative data. Here regression is used for assessing the or predicting the value of one variable from another variable, where we have simple linear, multiple linear, and also curvy linear. Okay, right? So the summary of my presentation, I have almost come to the end of my presentation. This is the last slide of my presentation. We have discussed so far various types of data, which means qualitative and quantitative. Under qualitative, nominal, ordinal. Under quantitative, we have discrete and continuous, and also interval and ratio. Various data collection methods, various graphical presentation methods like histogram, bar diagram, all those things we have discussed, my dear participants. And measures of central tendency and the dispersion. I would like to ask you only one question. What is your, before I read this complete summary of the presentation, I would like each one of you to write one learning thing which you have, one learning point which you have learned in this entire presentation. I will give you 30 seconds. I will give you the entire participants. Please type it in the chat box. One learning point which you have learned in this presentation, which you have not learned before or which you don't know before. And after my presentation, which you have learned, only one learning point which you can highlight in the chat box. I'll give 30 seconds and then we wind up the session, my dear participants. I'm waiting to receive your answers in the chat box. So nice to see all this feedback, learning point. Thank you all. I would like to listen to much more answers from the participants. Yes, correlation, appropriate test selection. Yes, null hypothesis. Thank you for the excellent presentation. Thank you, my dear participant. Correlation value -1 to +1. Concepts explained in nice way. Thank you. Application, appropriate presentation, test of significance, statistical test, classification of data, about chi-square and t-test. 3 simple questions to be answered. Yes, many more answers I am expecting, my dear participants. Statistical test of significance like paired and unpaired, Z-test, ANOVA. Clear revision of basics, sir. Thank you. Waiting for your next session. Yeah, me too. I'll definitely go in detail about all the statistical tests if I've been invited for the next session. Remembering 3 things before statistical analysis. Thank you so much. Sir, Somasundram sir, thank you, sir. Thank you. Very useful interactive session. Thank you so much, my dear participants. I think I can get much more answers. If you want, you can just continuously type the answers. So types of probability, non-probability sampling also we have discussed. Null hypothesis, various tests of significance. Correlation regression. This is a summary of the presentation. Yes, sir. Over to you, sir. Dr. Thompson, sir. Thank you so much for inviting to deliver such a lecture. I'm very happy, sir. I'm very happy for you, sir. Any questions?
I think you have cleared everything, sir. I think all the participants have cleared in between your session, so there is no such difficulty in asking question after the end of the session. So thank you very much, sir, for your excellently wonderful presentation on basics of biostatistics. Now I invite Professor and HOD Department of Community Medicine, Dr. Somasundram sir, to chair the session.
Thank you. First of all, I thank for the chairman and vice chairman and the dean, BP and MS and the DMS and the control of examination and director of academics for giving this opportunity for our department. And also my sincere thank to Professor Dr. Balaji Arugam for immediate acceptance for this program. And actually, it is very useful for students and faculties. Especially for today, there are so many interactions between the students and students and faculties. It is a very good, excellent, and nice presentation. I very much thank once again for Dr. Balaji Arugam, Professor and HOD of Community Medicine, Harvard Medical College, for delivering this nice lecture. And he explains various in this program types of data very clearly, and what are the scales of measurement and data collection methods, and about the descriptive statistics, and highlighted the about descriptive statistics and intrinsic statistics, and the data presentation regarding tables, charts, and graphs, diagrams, pictures very elaborately, and tabulations, pictogram, line diagram, bar diagram, how to put in use statistics and research methodology. And he mentioned about various types of sampling, especially simple random systematic and cluster sampling, and the test of significance, null hypothesis, importance of p-value statistics, and t-test, and also finally chi-square test, correlation and regression techniques in statistics. Very nicely, please. Thank you very much for explaining all these things in this particular time. Thank you once again. Thanks for Professor Arugam sir, Balaji Arugam sir, and a few questions from my side. And so, what is the alternative hypothesis?
So, alternative hypothesis actually just the opposite of null hypothesis. We call it as alternative hypothesis. Actually, in research, we do not state the alternative hypothesis directly. We always state null hypothesis, whether we accept or reject the null hypothesis. So in some statistical texts or some research books they say that if you reject the null hypothesis, we are automatically in favor of alternative hypothesis. So that is what many textbooks says.
Thank you. And where we use the student t-test, sir?
The student t-test actually, student t-test is a parametric test, which when I was discussing. I said the two important things, parametric and non-parametric. So student t-test is a parametric test, which means the data becomes measurable data where we express the data in terms of mean and standard deviation. We use the student t-test. So student t-test, which has got two types of paired t-test and unpaired t-test. Mostly it is done for only two groups, randomly selected two groups or two samples. So where unpaired t-test is done for independent groups and paired t-test is done for dependent groups. Okay, answer your questions.
Yes. Please tell some examples of cluster sampling.
Sir?
Cluster sampling examples.
Yes, cluster sampling. Cluster sampling, the most common example is a immunization survey, vaccination survey. Suppose if you want to do a vaccination survey in a state, say our COVID vaccination survey, if you really want to do, no, sir. So how you perform this immunization survey is nothing but you select levologous COVID vaccination because it's a different age group. But here, initially we consider on more than 45 years, right? So in every area, we will be having a population of more than 45 years age group or 18 and above, right? So 18 and above population forms a cluster in a particular area. Similarly, you will be having so many clusters living in a particular geographical area. Say, for example, in particular area, you will have one cluster. Similarly, you will be having 10 or 15 or so many clusters. So out of this 10 to 15 clusters, you can choose randomly 2 or 3 according to your study requirements. This is what we call it as a cluster sampling. The important aspect of cluster sampling is it's a time-saving sampling method where you cannot adapt simple random sampling method. You can adapt cluster sampling methods.
So the last question, sir, what is a trend analysis?
Sir?
Trend analysis.
What analysis, sir?
Trend. T-R-E-N-D. Trend analysis.
Trend analysis, sir. Trend.
Yes.
Trend analysis is almost similar to survival analysis. That is beyond the scope of this presentation, sir. I will refer and tell you this particular answer in further presentations.
Okay, sir. Thank you very much, sir, for answering my sincere thanks. The audience are requested to send the questions to email ID of the corresponding speaker for further clarification, sir. I request the audience to send the questions. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you so much for the opportunity, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Once again, thank you, sir. Thank you for your elaborative lecture on the statistics and biomedical research. And then I will invite Dr. Priyadarshini, Associate Professor of Community Medicine, to propose the vote of thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Ibrahim, sir. Good afternoon, everyone, to the one and all present here. At the outset, on behalf of the Community Medicine Department, I extend a warm welcome to the people in the gallery. I would like to thank our guest speaker, Dr. Balaji Arumugam, for sharing his knowledge on the topic statistics in medical research. Today's webinar was full of knowledge and interesting things. I am pretty sure the particular knowledge that Balaji Arumugam gave us will definitely help us in our studies and future. Thank you so much, sir. I'd like to express our profound gratitude to our chairman, Mr. J. Satish Kumar, sir, and Vice Chairman of Visagar for giving permission to organizing this webinar session. I would also like to thank our Dean, Professor Dr. V. Shanmugam, and the Vice Principal, Professor Dr. Usha, and Medical Superintendent, Professor Dr. Mohan, Deputy Medical Superintendent, Professor Dr. Ilangu, Controller of Examination, Professor Dr. P.M. Subramaniam, and Medical Director, Professor Dr. T. Dhansekhar, for their moral support and guidance. A special thanks to the teaching and non-teaching staff for their unflinching support and coordination. I thank the computer team, without whose helping hand this event wouldn't have been possible. Once again, I thank all for your cordial cooperation. Thank you.